They said this prison was impossible to escape. A rock in the middle of San Francisco Bay, surrounded by freezing water, violent currents, and guards trained to spot the smallest mistake. And yet, on one cold night in 1962, 3 men simply vanished. Not from the yard, not from a transport van, from inside their locked cells. The next morning, guards walked the line like always. Count, silence, count again. Everything looked normal until one guard reached in to wake a prisoner, and the head on the pillow rolled to the floor. That's when Alcatraz realized something terrifying. This wasn't an attempt. It was a successful escape. But here's the part that turned it into a legend. No bodies were ever found. No confirmed sightings. No final answer. So today, we're diving into the most famous prison mystery in the world and asking one question: did they drown, or did they actually make it? Alcatraz wasn't built to rehabilitate anyone. It was built to break people. Officially opened as a federal prison in 1934, it sat on an isolated island with only one way in and one way out, by boat. The distance to shore wasn't huge, but the water was brutal, cold enough to cause hypothermia fast, and currents unpredictable enough to pull swimmers off course. And Alcatraz didn't hold petty criminals. It held the inmates other prisons couldn't control: bank robbers, violent offenders, escape artists. Men who had already proven they could outsmart guards, fences, and locks. Inside, the rules were simple: silence, routine, and punishment. Cells were small, lights were controlled, and every movement was monitored, especially at night. That's why the prison became a symbol. Not just a place, a warning. But even Alcatraz had weaknesses. Not the obvious kind, the hidden kind. The kind nobody noticed because the island felt untouchable. In the early 1960s, the building was aging. Moist air and salt had been eating away at metal and concrete for years. And that slow decay created tiny opportunities. The kind a normal person would never see. A normal person. But the men in this story weren't normal. They didn't look at Alcatraz and see walls. They saw systems, patterns, timing, human habits. And one man in particular, quiet, intelligent, and patient, was about to turn those tiny weaknesses into the most famous escape plan ever attempted. His name was Frank Morris. On paper, he was just another inmate, another number in another cell. But the people who studied him knew he was different. Frank had spent most of his life in and out of institutions. He started committing crimes as a teenager, and he learned early that prison wasn't about strength, it was about observation. He was known for being calm, quiet, and extremely disciplined. He didn't start fights, he didn't show off, he watched. And Frank had something else, a reputation. Before Alcatraz, he had escaped from other facilities, more than once. That's why he was sent to the island in the first place. To the prison system, Alcatraz was the final answer. If someone kept escaping, you sent him to the rock. But the rock came with its own challenge, and Frank treated it like a puzzle. He studied guard schedules. He noticed which areas were loud at night, where noise could be hidden. He noticed that some vent openings were larger than they should be. He noticed how the building breathed, how pipes carried sound, steam, and heat. And slowly, a plan formed. Not a reckless plan, not a fast plan, a long plan. Because Frank Morris understood one brutal truth. In Alcatraz, you only get one real chance. So if you're going to do it, you don't just try to escape, you engineer it. Frank Morris wasn't planning to escape alone. In nearby cells were two brothers, John and Clarence Anglin. They didn't look like masterminds. They looked like regular working men. They grew up poor, doing seasonal farm labor, moving wherever there was work. But they had one advantage most inmates didn't. They were raised around water. They swam in cold rivers. They swam for fun, for pride, for survival. And when you grow up that way, you stop thinking of cold water as a monster. You think of it as something you can manage, if you respect it. Frank noticed that, and when he started speaking to them, quietly, carefully, through vents and stolen moments, he didn't sell them a dream. He spoke like an engineer. How long would it take to cross the bay? What time of night would have the least visibility? How do you keep air inside a raft made from raincoats? What happens if the current pushes you north instead of east? The brothers listened, and they didn't laugh. They knew this wasn't fantasy, it was a plan. And from that point on, the escape became a team project. Frank's patience and strategy, plus the Anglin's discipline and physical ability. Now comes the part that makes this story feel unreal. The digging. Alcatraz, at night, wasn't silent. After lights out, the prison had its own soundtrack. Steam pipes hissing, metal creaking, distant footsteps, doors clanking. That noise mattered because it gave them cover. They focused on a weak point beneath the sink, an old vent area where the concrete had been damaged by years of moisture and salt air. And their tools were almost embarrassing. Stolen spoons, improvised blades, and later a small homemade drill-like tool made from parts they could get inside the prison. But the real weapon wasn't the tool, it was time. Night after night, they worked in tiny bursts, not long enough to get caught, not fast enough to leave obvious damage. Then came the hardest part, hiding the mess. Concrete dust and chips can ruin everything. So they used pockets, pant cuffs, hidden bags, anything to carry debris. During yard time, they released it slowly while walking, so it looked like nothing. Some debris was hidden inside the utility spaces, out of sight. Weeks passed, then months. Eventually, the hole was big enough to squeeze through, and behind it, they discovered something most people never knew existed: a narrow utility corridor running behind the cells. That corridor changed everything, because once you're behind the wall, you're no longer in a cell block. You're in the building's skeleton, pipes, wiring, maintenance platforms. From there they could move, climb, and work while staying hidden from the main patrols. But there was still a fatal problem: bed checks. Guards weren't doing full inspections every hour, but they did enough. If a guard saw a missing body shape under a blanket, the plan was over. And that forced Frank Morris to create the most iconic detail of the whole escape. The dummy heads weren't a gimmick, they were life insurance. They had to work in low light from the hallway, in the split-second glance of a tired guard, so they built faces from soap and paper, layered, shaped, dried, then painted them to look like skin. And for hair, they used real clippings from the prison barber shop. From a distance, under a blanket, it looked like a sleeping man, close enough to buy them hours. Meanwhile, they were building the exit vehicle, the Raft. Over months, they stole dozens of raincoats, quietly, one at a time, so it wouldn't raise alarms. They stitched them together by hand, then sealed seams using heat from steam pipes. They tested leaks, retested, sealed again. And they didn't stop there. They built an air pump, accordion style, so they could inflate the raft fast, in darkness, without drawing attention. This wasn't just a plan to get out, it was a plan to survive the water. Because leaving the cell block was only half the escape. The bay was the real prison wall. June 11th, 1962. Late at night, everything had to feel normal. The blankets were arranged, the dummy heads were placed carefully, angle, shadow, distance, so a guard's flashlight wouldn't expose them. Then, one by one, they climbed through the holes into the utility corridor. This was the moment where a single sound could end it. A cough, a dropped tool, a metal scrape. But the prison's own noise helped them. Steam, pipes, wind. They moved upward through maintenance routes, reaching the roof. Outside, the air was cold and wet. San Francisco Bay was dark, and the island lights were behind them. They climbed down, away from the main sight lines, carrying the raft and supplies. Then, they inflated the raft. Imagine that moment. 3 men on one of the most secure islands in America, holding a homemade boat made of raincoats, about to trust their lives to the ocean. They pushed off. No alarms, no gunshots, no shouting, only waves. That, right there, was the last confirmed moment anyone can place them in the world. And here's the twist. If they died, the bay should have returned something. Clothes, bodies, anything. But it didn't. So what really happened after they hit the water? That's where the mystery begins.